8:21 on this Monday morning, and been looking forward to meeting Bonnie Reilly Schmidt. Thank you for coming to the BT studios.
Thank you for having me. Sharing
us your book, Silence. This is the untold story of the fight for equality in the RCMP, and you know this fight well. So you're one among the first women in the RCMP. Tell us what it was like in 1974.
Well, I joined in 1977, but I do have an example of what it was like when I was going through my training in Regina, and this is one of the reasons why I felt so passionately about writing this story. During my tenure in Regina, I remember being in a firearms training class one day, and one of the instructors who was teaching me leaned over to me, and toward the end of my training, he said that every time our troop was coming into the firing range to take a class, that they would turn down the heat so that our nipples would stand out through our t-shirts. And so that was a pivotal moment. I remember being so ashamed and so embarrassed that to think for months they had been looking at me
in that way.
Yes.
So what drove you to become a member of the RCMP at a time when it wasn't really where most women went? I mean, I applaud you for doing it, obviously, but you go in thinking, I want to do this. To what do you attribute that?
Well, I actually fell into the job. I was thinking of applying to the RCMP as a secretary or an executive assistant at the time, and the RCMP had just started to hire women for a specialized surveillance unit in the Lower Mainland here, and they were looking for women who didn't look like police officers, and so it was suggested to me that I apply for that position instead, and I did, and a year later I got in.
Okay, so that brings you to the training, and in your book it's fascinating to see how hard it was on everybody to go through the training, but specifically women.
Yes, yes. You know, but I think it was hard in 1974, particularly because it was such a big deal. It made international headlines. And the first troop of women, Troop 17, to go through, they were followed. Everything they did was scrutinized, commented upon, written about. And the RCMP opened it up to the media more so than the training academy, that is, more so than they had ever done in previous troops. So the women were literally followed. So it was extremely hard when they were just trying to fit in and be accepted with the male troops.
How much did it change for you from 77 to the end of your tenure with the RCMP, and what do you see in the RCMP now?
Well, I thought the change was slow. I mean, when you're in your 20s, you don't necessarily become aware, and when you're in the thick of things, you aren't necessarily aware of problems. So I would have to say that it was years later, after I was out of the RCMP, that I even remembered the story about the nipples and the training and how wrong that was. And you know, you develop coping mechanisms when you're in, and so you don't think of it in terms of, oh, I am being harassed or discriminated against in any way.
Now, when we talk about the word of mouth and what we're hearing and some accusations that are made against the RCMP, in your experience, did you find that there was also the camaraderie and that bond that you had with your fellow RCMP, male or female?
Absolutely. I mean, it was a wonderful place to work. I enjoyed it. I worked with some tremendous people, male and female. I felt respected, and I was successful. I enjoyed what we were working on. I enjoyed the type of work, but I know that's not the story for every woman.
Right, and that is explained in Silence, your book, because it is the untold story. What brought you and inspired you to read this, or to write this book?
I conducted a number of interviews with police officers, male and female, inside and outside the RCMP. I conducted about 45 interviews for my PhD research, and those stories were amazing. That's what inspired me. The stories weren't the heroic, romanticized tale that we're always used to hearing about, you know, Mounties always catching their man, based on the 19th century model of the Northwest Mounted Police. So it inspired me the differences between the women's stories and that romantic version that we're so used to hearing about.
This is a very historic account. It's very beautifully laid out. There's there's an entire portion here about sexual orientation and how that is scrutinized within the RCMP. We don't have time to go into all of it. I wanted to share one thing that we were talking about in the break. One of the quotes is that it was concluded that sexual harassment was not an expression of sexual desire, but an assertion of power. And I think that's lost on many people in today's day, where we think sexual harassment actually has to do only with sex. It's an assertion of power. So we thank you for your book.
Thank you so much,
and the message.
Jody. Thank you so much for
It is
having
called
me.
Silenced, and it is Bonnie Reilly Schmidt, and we recommend that you have a look at this book.